Howdy folks, and welcome back. I've been actively UFO hunting for about 16 months now, with at least $7,000 invested into equipment. I want to share a few tips I've picked up and give you a general idea of how I do things. I won't be going into any detail about the various benefits of each of my cameras right now because I'm making a separate camera comparison video that will go more in depth there. I also just bought a photography drone that I will use for UFO reenactments. I wanted to do this for my first video about my sightings from 16 years ago, but I didn't have the chance. Expect that video within the next couple of weeks. Since safety is always first, we're going to start there. Dress for the weather. Even if you're in a vehicle, it might break down and you'll need to survive until help arrives. A high visibility vest or jacket for any outdoor activity is good practice. Focus on driving and be aware of your surroundings. Check your headlights, taillights, and turn signals, follow all your local laws, and be respectful to people around you. This should go without saying, but don't stop in the middle of the road. With that out of the way, there's a few things you'll need to start off with. Obviously, a camera is priority. I have a CMOS wide-angle camera mounted to the roof of my truck with a magnet. It's controlled by an Alienware laptop, and yes, the brand is important to note since they increase your chances of seeing a UFO by 3%. I also have my GoPro mounted to the roof, and that's pointed straight forward and slightly up. My main DSLR camera with a 300mm low-light lens is on a tripod which is zip-tied to the air vents. While a smartphone will work, I recommend a dedicated camera for a few reasons. First off, unless you have a really nice phone, the camera on them is rather bad, at least in low light. Secondly, there's a couple apps that are handy to look at. Flight Radar 24 will show you planes in your area, which will help identify the vast majority of lights you'll see. It doesn't show every plane, but it will eliminate at least 80% of things flying overhead. Another awesome app is called Stellarium, and it's a mobile planetarium that will show you stars, planets, satellites, and the International Space Station. A few other accessories you'll want is a tripod, power source, extra batteries, and extra SD cards. If you're using a telephoto lens, a red dot sight will help since a wider field of view makes it easier to aim. I recommend keeping a bottle of glass cleaner along with some rags. Smudges on glass can cause unwanted reflections and lower the quality of your footage or outright ruin it. I also suggest you keep everything organized. It's rather frustrating driving for 45 minutes only to realize you forgot a battery, SD card, random cable, or a tripod mount. That's only happened to me a couple times. Since you have all your equipment and it's organized, you'll want to make sure you know how to operate everything. Attempting to figure out where the buttons are in the dark while you're trying to record what might be a UFO is a terrible time to be learning. You'll also want to know what settings are best for various lighting conditions. The best way to practice is take random videos and pictures of whatever you want, but I recommend birds. They're fun to watch and they randomly fly around, making them good practice. These are probably the most important tips here. When you're recording a possible UFO, you want to keep a stationary object in frame with it. While it's not always possible, especially if you're using a telephoto lens, it will give you a constant reference point. The reference point will help determine speed and any abnormal movements that aren't caused by a moving camera. This is also where a tripod comes into play. You can use anything in the foreground or background or even a star, but the constant reference point is important, and I will demonstrate why in a minute. The other big thing to consider is your camera settings. This will depend on the type and quality of your camera, but you want it to gather enough light to see a potential reference point without drowning out the object. Here's a clip of why those two things are important. This is a white dot on a black background moving around, but when the settings are adjusted correctly, you can see it's just a house, and now you also have a constant point of reference. So if that light was just above the house, you'd see the house moving along with it, meaning it's not the light moving, it's the camera. Another quick tip is if you see what might be a UFO, start recording. Debunk yourself later. It's easy to delete a file, but you'll regret not hitting record sooner if it turns out to be unique. This is another reason why I recommend a dedicated camera. If you have to check the radar before you hit record, you just wasted 30 seconds. Now that you have all your equipment, it's organized, and you know how to use it, where do you go? Well, if you have a backyard with a good view of the sky, you might as well just go there. You'll never forget something at home, and you'll save time along with gas, making it overall more convenient and comfortable. If your backyard is like mine, you'll want to go elsewhere for a better view. If you've seen a UFO previously, you might as well go back to that spot. My logic is that if they were there once or twice, they might go back, and hopefully this time you're ready. You can also take a look at a UFO sighting map and find a place near you with a high concentration of reported sightings. Nuclear power plants tend to have more sightings near them, so that might not be a bad place to start. When you're looking for a place to sit in your vehicle, you'll want to avoid parking lots with lots of overhead lights. You'll also want to avoid busy roads. City parks typically have closing times, so if you're staying out past 10 o'clock, they're not ideal. You'll want the clearest view of the sky without much light pollution. I personally park on the side of a farm road that has very minimal traffic and overlooks where I've seen them previously. It also happens to have 2 power plants next to it, one of which is a nuclear one. The 5 states with the highest number of reported sightings per capita are Idaho, Montana, New Hampshire, Maine, and New Mexico. Not that most of us will be traveling, but it's a bonus if you're already living there. My state of Minnesota is 23rd on that list. Alright, you have your equipment, it's organized, you know how to use it, and you have a spot picked out. What time do you go? According to some Google searches, the best time of day is between 4 o'clock p.m. and 10 o'clock p.m., while the peak is 9 o'clock p.m. to 10 o'clock p.m. The vast majority of my sightings were right around 10 o'clock. I typically try to be set up by 9:30, and I'll stay 1 to 4 hours depending on my schedule. And on the rare occasion, I will be out there all night. The last thing worth mentioning is staring at the sky for hours might get a little dull. I recommend listening to music, podcasts, YouTube, or movies. The key word is listening. Don't actually watch videos. You'll want your attention on the sky. You could also get into astrophotography. You're already out staring at the sky, you might as well take some cool pictures. However, this does require a larger investment into equipment. Your other options are to try Stephen Greer's method of meditation, and apparently meditation is good for you, so it's a win regardless of results. Plus, it's free. You might also consider doing some exercises. Again, it's free and it's good for you. And maybe bring some snacks and beverages because you might get hungry or thirsty. The last important tip is to be patient. You won't see a UFO every time you go looking, and if you do happen to see one, the footage will probably still be crap. The most important thing is to have fun, enjoy yourself, and maybe learn something new. Anyway, that covers all the basics. If you have anything to add, please leave a comment. Like the video if you found it somewhat informative, and consider subscribing so you don't miss out on my UFO reenactment, and hopefully some actual UFO footage. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and stay safe.